Michael or be with Michael. And then he likes you.
I was 7 years old. Michael asked, do you and the family want to come to Neverland?
We drive in and forget about all your problems. You were in Neverland. It was a fantasy.
The days were filled with magical childhood adventure experiences. Playing tag, watching movies, eating junk food, anything you could ever want as a child.
It's like hanging out with a friend that's more your age.
Just kid things. They were just doing kid things. He just came across as a loving, caring, kind soul. It was easy to believe that he was just that.
Out of a storybook, right? Out of a fairy tale.
Hello, Wade. Today is your birthday, so congratulations. I love you. Goodbye.
There's no thoughts of this is wrong or anything like that.
He told me if they ever found out what we were doing, he and I would go to jail for the rest of our lives.
Secrets will eat you up. You feel so alone.
I want to be able to speak the truth as loud as I had to speak the lie for so long.
Hi everyone, and narcissism and cults, and how similar that was to the families. Well, a lot of the things that I saw there, as I was working on, I also saw parallel in this Michael Jackson story. I always believed, naively I guess, but he was said to be not guilty, and so I over-empathized for him, thinking that he had kind of this sad, tragic life. I knew that he had been abused, I knew that he had an abusive father, and before I thought of him as kind of this wacky, emotionally immature, kind of frozen in childhood, messed up, but relatively harmless. I don't see him at all that way now. Now I see him as very sinister and plotting and planning and cruel, really cruel. How little these boys were and how they've gone through, what they've had to go through. And then of course, having gone through my own CPTSD and knowing what that's like, I just absolutely believe this documentary. I believe everything that they were saying, and because it was all about the way that they're groomed and all of that, and we know that, you know? If you grew up in a narcissistic family, you know that. And so Michael Jackson, he became an abuser, and he was quite masterful at what he was doing and using his fame to manipulate everyone around him. And he targeted their parents' narcissism. Basically, they kind of sacrificed up their sons to get some time, to get to feel special.
Thousands and thousands of dollars of gifts.
There were all those trips to New York, Florida, Europe. But while Geordie hung out with the star, his mother June, it's claimed, was sent off with a credit card.
This mother had been taken along on all these trips. But wherever they went, the mother and daughter were sent away.
One of the most amazing gifts that he gave her was a Rubian diamond Cartier bracelet, which was quite extravagant. And would really tend to sweep a person off her feet, I think. And definitely, I think, did that for June.
These mothers, and Michael Jackson worked on them. He worked on developing relationships with them as well. And they both felt very maternal about him. They felt like the way that he worked on them was to basically pose himself. He was like a 35-year-old man, but he made himself seem like an eternal child. People say, oh, he's like a 9-year-old stuck in a grown man's body. And so I can kind of see it, this make-believe world that he presented. It was just so overwhelming, because these are the people that these two families that they profiled were very, very, very middle-class families, just, modest homes and modest occupations and modest lifestyles. And then they get completely overwhelmed by his life in Neverland, and you know, private jets and, you know, just this outrageous lifestyle.
We drive in and forget about all your problems. You were in Neverland.
They made it seem as though they were doing it for their son, you know? And the one family lived in Los Angeles, but the other one actually moved broke up the family and moved from Australia over to be in Los Angeles, to be near Michael. And the abuse went on for years. It went on for years, and then he basically discarded them. It was the full on, he totally discarded them, like just replaced them, without, you know, unceremoniously replaced them. And then would use them, would give them, you know, would dose them up and, you know, give them little crumbs of attention. You know, he did complete love bomb, you know, over, you know, just like, it was, at the time the technology was like faxes, you know, fill their, you know, one family said they'd come home from being out for whatever, the evening or something, and come back and their living room would be full of fax paper from faxes coming through. All these little notes, they showed him on there, little notes about how much he loved them. And in both cases, the fathers were pretty absent. So there was just no safe place for the kids to go. Plus what Michael did was he basically undermined their relationship with their mothers, with their parents, and made himself the confidant and told them, if anyone finds out what we're doing, it's going to ruin both of our lives. We're both going to go to jail. It'll be over. You'll never see me again. We'll never see each other again. They'll keep us apart, and we'll both go to jail for the rest of our lives. And eventually, when he's accused of you know, he's accused for the first time, or the second time, I'm sure which, well, both times in fact, he was accused in the 90s, like 93 or so, and then he was accused again in like 2005. And so the kids were, these two boys that they profiled in the video, they were actually actively being abused at the time that the first time he was accused, and they testified on his behalf, even while they're being actively abused. The second time, by then they were grown men and barely, you know, early 20s, but having a hard time, starting to struggle, but still in complete denial about what the struggle had anything to do with that. And they had not made the leap. And this is so hard for people that have not been abused to understand this. But they had not made the leap between what had happened to them was actually abuse, and that what they were defending him for was the very abuse that, you know, that they weren't putting that together. He groomed them very much that we're in love, we're a family. With one of them, they were almost like a married couple. He said they went through a wedding ceremony and everything. And these guys are not gay; they're both married with kids of their own now. But he went through a wedding ceremony, exchanged rings, diamond rings, and, you know, he still had the ring. We weren't there, so it's hard to know exactly how you would be. But I can't imagine that I would have gone along with some of the things that were happening. He maybe made the mistake of letting your son and your daughter together spend the night in his room, knowing he had this other bed on the loft, doing it one night, but then the next day what happened with that was the very first time this one kid was in his room. The very next day, the family was supposed to be leaving for a trip to the Grand Canyon. And Michael asked the kid, "Wait, wouldn't you rather stay with me?" And so the family went to the Grand Canyon, and he left Wade with Michael for the week. And so, of course, the molestation started immediately. And what it did is it went on for that, you know, right then he was, you know, very involved with him, saw him often. And then, you know, constantly was paying attention to him. They have long conversations for like hours and hours and hours after he went home. And, you know, this went on for a couple of years, but then when he came out to Los Angeles finally, he found other boys, and he was starting to get discarded. And at that point, he only saw him like a few times a year. But every time he'd see him, of course, it would be sexual all over again. And every time he'd see him, he'd get dosed, and he'd get the feeling of, okay, we're all right, we're okay after all. He loves me still, and I'm, you know. And then he would ghost again and just disappear. And so it was just this push-pull, building the addiction, building the insecurity, and at the same time, this kid was away from home, away from his big brother, away from his dad. He was out there with his sister and his mom, and Michael started calling him Little One, and he started thinking of Michael as like his surrogate dad now, and still not. And he had complete clear memory. He didn't have there was no repressed memories here. He had complete clear memory of everything that Michael had done to him. And it's just that he didn't think of it. He didn't think of it as abuse. He just didn't think of it as abuse. So when he was I don't know, maybe like 11 years old or something, when he testified the first time that, you know, nothing inappropriate, that Michael had never done anything inappropriate, I don't think he would have had any idea what he was saying. You know, I don't think he had any idea what he was saying. When he was older, he knew what he was saying, but he said in his mind, what happened with Michael was, and they both said this, what happened was, it was a secret that he was going to die with. He hadn't told anybody, neither of them had told anybody, and they were not ever going to tell anybody. It was something that, you know, he was going to his grave with and never planned to tell anybody. And what ended up changing it was, for both of them, was when they became fathers of little boys. When they became fathers of little boys, they started to break down. I remember that changing me too. That was a big changing moment in my life for me too. And I also was very aware of, I was scared of having a girl. I was scared of having a little girl, and relieved when I had boys, because I was afraid. I was afraid I couldn't keep a little girl safe. Well, it turns out I couldn't keep a little boy safe either. This abuse is, the reason it works is because you have kids that are programmed from birth. And these are the people that they love, the people that they look up to, the people they rely on, the people that they, you know, are their everything. And in this case, what was even more insidious than that is that because Michael was so famous, and because these kids happened to be artistic kind of kids, and you know, they ended up, you know, having a real knack and a real interest in dance and all that. So they were seduced even before they ever met him. You know, they were, you know, obsessing on his videos, or wearing, you know, dressed up to look like him, all that stuff before they ever even met him. I hope you watched the documentary. Really, really excellent at showing how the grooming process, how a perpetrator grooms victims. It's excellent at doing that. And I think that the two men that are profiled in it are very, very credible. I just have no doubt. I just have no doubt that it's true what they said. It makes perfect sense. The only way they would not make sense to you, why they waited, why they would back Michael up, and only now, after he's been gone 10 years, be able to do this after they have little boys of their own, makes perfect sense to me. Makes absolute perfect sense to me. But of course, that's what the family and people against it are saying. And they're saying, oh, they're in it for money. But of course, in keeping it, squashing it, because they're in it for money. And the other thing, one thing that's really interesting too about it is that the family is, you know, talking about, we know our brother, you know, they're all acting like they're rallying behind their brother. But what you see in the documentary is that Michael seemed very alone. And he certainly played off that he was alone. He played off that he was very alone and lonesome. And, you know, and so it's interesting that the family is all acting like, oh, we know our brother, and, you know, it just seems kind of strange, because doesn't seem like, I don't remember there being there was no conversation, no talk about when Michael's family was all around. The only family that they mentioned really at all were his kids, and that was only at the very end after the abuse was over. And that was only the last time that he saw him. He was at his house in Vegas, and his kids were there. And then what I also found was I found video from back when the first allegations were made of LaToya Jackson basically saying that it's all completely true and that the mother knows it's true and that there's this whole big cover-up because everyone's relying on Michael to take care of them financially. And it was the most articulate thing I've ever seen LaToya Jackson do. She seemed, it was the first time she ever seemed normal to me.
Very difficult for me that Michael is my brother. I love him a great deal, but I cannot and I will not be a silent collaborator of his crimes against small, innocent children. And if I remain silent, then that means that I feel the guilt and the humiliation that these children are feeling, and I think it's very wrong. I have seen checks payable to the parents of these children. And I don't know if these children were apparently bought to the parents by Michael or not, but I have seen these checks. And I've seen these checks through my mother. She's shown me these checks that Michael had written to these children, and it's for a great amount. And I'm not speaking pennies. The sums are very, very large amount. And this is my first time talking about it, and I never want to speak about it. I never want to say anything about it. But I think it's sad because I am a victim myself, and I know what it feels like. And these kids are going to be scarred for the rest of their life, and I don't want to see any more innocent small children being affected this way. I love Michael very dearly, but I feel even more sorry for these children because they don't have a life anymore. They don't. Now you stop and you think for 1 second, and you tell me what 35-year-old man is going to take a little boy and stay with him for 30 days, and take another boy and stay with him for 5 days, in a room and never leave the room. How many of you out there are 35 years old? How many men are out there? How many would take little kids and do that are 9, 10, 11 years old? I love my brother, but it's wrong. I don't want...
So, you know, I hope that she will speak up for these kids, because that message, however old it is still very much needed. You know, very much needed. We haven't made the kind of progress that we should have. You know, it shouldn't be possible for this to happen. Apparently, the guys made a claim for money, and they did that because they didn't want it just to, you know, go on a show and talk about it and then have it just be forgotten. They wanted to, you know, turn it all to some good. And so if they could get a win in court and do something with the money, then that would make a statement to the public about this thing. And it's so far right now they're in appeals because it was thrown out because of the statute of limitations. The symptoms seem to be so much the same. It just gets to be so blown up and so hard to recognize. And a narcissist with that much money and power is completely insulated from anything that would interfere with his grandiose message or his false reality. And the sense of entitlement that Michael Jackson had was, you know, just outrageous. He felt completely entitled to do what he wanted to do with these boys, and then had no thoughts about how devastating it was going to be to them when he just dumped them and moved on. It was really, 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 that part really hit me. If you watched the documentary, please put some comments down in the comment section and let me know what you thought of it. We're real interested to know. Okay, thanks a lot. I'll talk with you later. Bye-bye.